My life took a delightful turn when I met James. Previously, my days revolved around navigating through one corporate crisis after another. However, entering James's life introduced me to a world filled with sweetness, quite literally, at his family-owned candy shop, Sweet Sanctuary. Here, love and confections blended seamlessly, and soon I found myself managing the finances of this charming little store. "Good morning, love," James would say, his smile brightening up the room as I walked into the deliciously scented shop. Despite any underlying tension, his warmth was a constant reminder of my new, joyful purpose. "Morning," I'd respond, sorting through the mail, mostly bills, which I'd become adept at handling. "Sales are up this month. That new chocolate line is really taking off," I'd share, trying to keep the mood upbeat. James would respond with a nonchalant shrug. "Yeah, well, that's all you're doing. Mom still sees me as the candy king," he'd joke, though I sensed a twinge of pressure beneath his casual demeanor. Just then, his mother, Patricia, would burst into the store, all smiles and invading personal space. "James, my boy, you've outdone yourself. The store looks fabulous," she'd exclaim, patting him on the back. Her eyes would then shift to me, her smile tightening ever so slightly. "Karen, still playing shopkeeper, I see." I'd let out a quiet sigh, keeping my tone polite. "Good morning, Patricia." "Yes, playing shopkeeper is keeping us in the black," I'd reply, avoiding confrontation. Patricia would dismiss my comment with a wave of her hand. Numbers. You should leave that to the accountants and help my son with the real business," her voice dripping with barely veiled disdain. Before I could respond, James would step in. "Mom, Karen's doing more than fine. We're doing great because she's got a business head." He'd put his arm around me, a silent but firm gesture of support. Patricia would sniff dismissively. "Well, as long as my boy is happy, I suppose that's what matters." With that, she'd flounce off, leaving a trail of her presence behind. James would squeeze my side apologetically. "Don't let her get to you," he'd murmur. I'd force a smile. "I'm not. Let's just focus on the shop, okay?" And we did, pouring our hearts into making Sweet Sanctuary not just a candy store, but a slice of paradise. That sense of paradise persisted until I began noticing troubling signs. Deliveries became more frequent, filled not with ingredients for confections, but with expensive gadgets carrying alarming price tags. "Another package, James?" I'd ask one evening, locking up the cash register and eyeing a sleek new gadget still in its packaging. "Oh, that's the new phone I ordered," James would say, his excitement palpable as he tore into the package. "Top of the line." I'd raise an eyebrow. "Don't we have other priorities? The mixer in the back has been making that strange noise." James would wave off my concerns, his attention glued to his new toy. "It's fine, Karen. We've got to treat ourselves too, you know." Part of me wanted to protest to remind him of the precarious financial tightrope we were walking, but I held back, hoping for a balance between treating ourselves and sustaining our dream. I kept quiet, though it wasn't just the phone causing my concern. Patricia, ever the showwoman, regularly flaunted her latest extravagant purchases, turning Sweet Sanctuary into her fashion runway. "Karen, look at this dress. Isn't it just darling?" she'd say, twirling in an expensive floral dress that surely cost more than what we earned in a day. "It's nice," I'd reply, my tone measured. "But shouldn't we be saving to fix the sign outside?" Patricia would just pat James's cheek dismissively. "Nonsense, the store is doing wonderfully. James, tell her." James, only half paying attention, would nod in agreement. "Yeah, we're doing great, Karen. Don't worry so much." But that was exactly my issue. I did worry. Every time I checked our financials, the numbers told a different story, one of dwindling profits consumed by frivolous expenses. "Look, we should be careful," I suggested again later that week as we reviewed our financial situation. James gave me a look as if I'd proposed selling the store to join the circus. "A budget? Come on, Karen, it's not that bad. You're being stingy," he said. That word, stingy, it stung. I wasn't being stingy, I was being prudent. It's not about being stingy, James. It's about being smart. We need to think about the future of Sweet Sanctuary, I argued, but he seemed uninterested, already browsing another website for his next purchase. You worry too much, he dismissed, half distracted. It'll all work out. The situation escalated when Patricia decided we needed extra help. It was a Tuesday, our inventory day, and I was organizing our latest shipment of candy jars when she walked in, arm in arm with a young girl, barely 20. Karen, this is Lisa, Patricia introduced with a flourish. Lisa, dear, this is Karen, my son's assistant. I straightened up, wiping my hands on my apron. Nice to meet you, Lisa, but I'm the co-manager here, I corrected politely. Lisa's smile was polite but distant. I've heard a lot about you. I'm excited to be part of the team. Patricia's smug expression told me she hadn't consulted James about this hiring. What exactly will Lisa be assisting with? I asked, maintaining a friendly tone. Oh, she's going to help with the business side of things. You can only do so much after all, Patricia replied, her gaze flitting dismissively over my inventory sheets. I nodded, though confusion and concern mingled within me. All right, well, we have a system here, so I'll need to bring her up to speed. It quickly became apparent that Lisa's idea of helping was more about observing than actively participating. When I discovered the salary Patricia had approved for her, I was shocked. James, can we talk? I asked him later in the office. Sure, what's up? He asked, not looking up from his computer. It's about Lisa. Her salary, it's more than we can afford for her role, I explained. James finally looked up, his expression troubled. Mom said it was fine. She thinks Lisa's going to bring a lot to the table. I sighed, feeling as though I was speaking to a wall. The challenges at Sweet Sanctuary were mounting, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep our Sweet Sanctuary from turning sour. Despite our agreement to discuss new hires together, especially regarding their salaries, James dismissed the importance with a shrug, an all too common gesture of his lately. What's done is done. Mom has a good feeling about her, he remarked. Frustrated, I had to hold back my response, relying on good feelings wasn't going to balance our books. I left his office, the only one apparently aware of the red flags, while James and his mother seemed to parade through the business blindfolded. I've always been meticulous, double-checking, and sometimes triple-checking, especially with numbers. One day, while searching for a misplaced invoice, I found an envelope tucked away in the back of a filing cabinet. Assuming it was just another overlooked bill, I opened it only to feel my heart drop. Inside was a loan document listing Sweet Sanctuary as collateral, with a sum wildly beyond what our humble shop could justify. James, I called, entering his cluttered office with the papers in hand. As he looked up, I caught a flicker of guilt in his eyes. His first in months. What is this? I asked. Oh, that? It's nothing, just a small loan I took out for store improvements, he replied nonchalantly. Store improvements? I repeated incredulously. This amount could renovate the store 9 times over. What did you really use it for? There was a tense pause, long enough for the truth to settle uncomfortably between us. Look, he began cautiously, I might have used some of it for the house, the one I've been fixing up for us. For us? I repeated, my tone sharpened by disbelief. Or for your gadgets and whatever else you've been wasting money on? He stood up then, his chair scraping back like a judge's gavel calling for order, yet all I felt was the rise of my frustration. It's not like that, Karen. You don't understand. This is all going to pay off in the end. I shook my head. No, James. Taking out a loan against the store without telling me, that's what I don't understand. How could you be so reckless? Before he could answer, Patricia entered, her expression souring as she noticed the documents in my hand. What's all this? She demanded. James started to explain, but I cut him off, pushing the loan papers toward her. Did you know about this? She barely glanced at the documents, dismissing them with a wave. Of course I did. James is just doing what's necessary for our future. And who are you to question him? You're just the help after all." Her words stung, but they also ignited a resolve within me. "Just the help?" I replied, my voice steady and firm. "I've been keeping the store afloat while you two have been treating it like your personal bank account." James's face turned pale, and Patricia looked as if she was ready to erupt. "You ungrateful little—" she began, but I interrupted, surprisingly calm. "What's ungrateful is not recognizing the hard work someone's putting into this business. What's foolish is risking everything for a house that we don't even need." They were speechless, caught in their misdeeds. I left the room then, the documents clutched in my hand like a pending judgment. Later that day, the kitchen table, usually reserved for casual meals, became the setting for a somber discussion, as if it were a council of war rather than a chat about a candy shop. James cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact. "We need to talk about the store's future," he said. I sat down, folding my hands on the table, ready to address the issues we had long ignored. As I sat at the table, confronting the harsh reality of our situation, Patricia's demeanor grew stern. "We need to be realistic, Karen. The store isn't making enough to cover the debts. We have to find money somewhere." It was the way she said "we" that sounded alarm bells. It seemed to imply the responsibility fell on me. "What do you suggest?" I asked, maintaining my composure. Her eyes flickered with a calculating coldness. "You have that inheritance from your parents. It could clear the debts and stabilize the store." I was taken aback, feeling like I was talking to a stranger, not the mother of the man I married. "You want me to use my parents' money, the money intended for my personal security?" I asked, incredulous. James chimed in, "It's not like you're doing anything else with it." "And what about our security?" Patricia interjected sharply, implying that my funds should be a familial resource. I looked between them, my heart sinking. "I am part of this family, but it feels like you only acknowledge that when you need something from me." James shifted uneasily. "It's not like that, Karen, but we're struggling here." "So you expect me to just hand over my future?" I questioned, disbelief coloring my tone. Patricia leaned in, pressing her point. "If you care about this family, yes." I thought about all the long hours and sleepless nights I had spent trying to keep the store afloat. "If I do this, if I use my inheritance, I want 1/3 of the store. I want to be an official co-owner." The room fell silent. Then Patricia laughed dismissively, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "You? A co-owner? Don't be ridiculous. You're not business material." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Then find another way to cover your debts because my inheritance is not your emergency fund." James's expression was unreadable, but Patricia's face flushed with anger. "You'd let this family business fail?" "I've tried to save it," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "But I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm." That night, a nagging feeling pulled me back to Sweet Sanctuary. The shop was dark as expected, but a faint glow from the back office suggested otherwise. I pushed the door open, the usual comforting tinkle of the bell now sounding almost ominous. The sweet scent of candy, once reassuring, now seemed thick with deception. As I neared the back, the murmurs from the office grew louder. Through the partly open door, I saw James, his arms around Lisa, the new assistant, who giggled at something he whispered. I pushed the door fully open and they sprang apart, their faces morphing from shock to guilt in an instant. "Karen," James stammered, straightening his shirt, "it's not what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like I just caught my husband with his arms around another woman." Lisa fumbled with her hair, avoiding my gaze. "We were just going over inventory." "At midnight? With the inventory in your arms?" I replied dryly. James's eyes pleaded. "Karen, please. You're blowing this out of proportion." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Am I?" The cold calm that settled over me was clear. The trust and partnership I thought we had were shattered. From my perspective, everything was unmistakably clear. He stepped toward me, but I raised a hand to stop him. Save it, James. I don't know which is worse, your cheating or the feeble lies. Lisa finally found her voice, though it was faint. I'm sorry, Karen. I never wanted any of this to happen. I studied her, youthful, naive, tangled in the snare of a man unable to own up to his mistakes. You should be sorry, and you, James, should start job hunting, I declared. James was quick to object. You can't fire her over this. My determination was unyielding. I can and I will. Tomorrow I'll be contacting a lawyer. His complexion turned ashen. Karen, please, let's discuss this. There's nothing left to discuss, I interrupted sharply. You've made your choices. Now you have to live with them. Without waiting for his reply, I left the room, my head high, his pleas fading behind me. The following morning was bright, contrasting sharply with the gloom of our household. Having spent the night at my apartment, a property I maintained for rental, I sat at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed. It was a message from James. Tempted to ignore it, curiosity prevailed. It was a photo of a bank letter demanding immediate repayment. Below it, he typed, "We need to talk. This is serious," I replied, on my way, and prepared to confront whatever awaited. When I reached the confectionery, James and Patricia were already there, pacing nervously. Patricia noticed me first, her expression darkening. "Decided to show up, did you?" she snapped as I entered. I nodded, meeting her glare. "You wanted to talk." James handed me the letter. "The bank's on us hard. We could lose everything." I reviewed the letter, unsurprised by the figures, yet uneasy. "So, what's your plan?" Patricia glared at me. "We wouldn't be in this mess if you'd just helped when we asked." Ignoring her, I turned to James. "What are you going to do?" He looked defeated, running a hand through his hair. "I thought maybe you could cover it with your inheritance." My laugh was bitter. "I told you I'm not footing this bill without a stake in the business." Patricia stepped forward. "You're being unreasonable, Karen. This is a family business." I met her challenge with forced calm. "And where was this family when your son was mismanaging our funds and hiring his buddies for kicks?" James opened his mouth to speak, but then faltered, looking down. "You don't get to play the family card only when it's convenient," I continued. "We'll need to figure something else out." James muttered, "You'll have to." Then, unexpectedly, Patricia smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. "Fine, but if you're not helping, then you're out. We'll manage without you. You're fired." I stared at her, letting the silence linger before matching her smile. "Okay." Their astonishment was almost amusing. "Just like that?" James asked, incredulous. "Just like that," I confirmed. "I need you to understand that I've meticulously gathered evidence. I took photographs of your dealings with Lisa and kept a detailed log of every dime squandered. If you think you can dismiss me and bury this mess, you're sorely mistaken." As Patricia's smile faltered, she said, "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, but I would. And as I leave, I'll take my hard-earned achievements with me. Let's see how you'll explain to the bank why the business is floundering without its real pillar." Months had rolled by since I last walked through the doors of Sweet Sanctuary. My life had since aligned with a new rhythm. Paper rustling, the quiet hum of productivity, and resolving challenges had replaced the fragrant whiff of sweets. Now seated in my crisp new office, a world away from the confectionary's chaotic storeroom, my phone rang. Angela's name lit up the caller ID. She was a former colleague from the shop and the only connection to that part of my past I maintained. "Hey, Angela, what's new?" I greeted, a tinge of apprehension in my voice, knowing that updates from Sweet Sanctuary always stirred old memories. "Haven't you heard?" Angela's voice mixed pity with discomfort. "The shop shut down last week, the bank foreclosed on it, and even their house." A sense of unanticipated relief washed over me. "How are James and his mother coping?" There was a brief pause. "Not well, I'm afraid. They've moved in with his aunt. They've been keeping a low profile." "Thanks for letting me know, Angela," I responded, the news settling in. She hesitated, then added, "Karen, everyone knew you were the lifeblood of that place. It just wasn't the same after you left." A small, sad smile touched my lips. "Thanks for saying so. How about you? Have you found something new?" "Yes, I'm at a bakery downtown now. It's no sweet sanctuary, but it's a beginning." "That's great to hear, Angela. You've always had a knack for baking. I'm sure you'll do well." We exchanged a few more words before ending the call. Looking out the window at the bustling street below, there was a knock at my door. "Your 4 o'clock appointment is here," my assistant announced. "Thanks, send them in," I replied, ready to shake off the last traces of nostalgia. A couple walked in, worry etched on their faces about their enterprise. As I stood to greet them, I felt energized by the new challenge. "We've heard excellent things about you, Karen," the wife said as they took their seats. "They say you're the top crisis manager around." I smiled, feeling at ease with the acknowledgement. "I'll strive to live up to that. Now, tell me about your business and let's explore how we can steer things back on track." As they detailed their issues, my mind buzzed with strategies. This was my domain now, where each problem had a remedy and every challenge was a doorway to opportunity. Sweet Sanctuary, with its bittersweet recollections, lay behind me, and ahead was a path I had crafted for myself, one of resilience, redemption, and new beginnings. As our conversation continued, their initial anxiety transformed into hopeful smiles. They departed with renewed vigor, and I turned back to my desk, my spirit lighter than it had been in ages. I realized then that the most rewarding victories often come after the toughest trials, and the future was mine to shape, one deliberate step at a time.
"I'm back," I called out as I stepped through the door. My mother-in-law used to warmly reply, "Welcome home," but this time, there was only silence. "I'll start dinner," I said, heading to the living room. Usually, she'd rush me, reminding me of everyone's hunger, but today was different. I froze. My mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law were already enjoying sushi without me. "Surprise!" my sister-in-law chirped, her smile wicked. Then with a smirk, she added, "Looks like someone doesn't belong here." I had no idea just how right she was. "My name is Peyton. I met my husband Chase at work. He worked in sales and often came to my office, and I was his main contact. As we spent more time together in meetings, I started to like him. He was caring and kind, tall, and not exactly what you'd call handsome, but he had a charming personality. He was well-liked, but for some reason, he said he liked me, and we started dating. When we talked, Chase told me he grew up in a normal family with parents and a sister. I lost my parents when I was young and grew up in an orphanage. It was a hard thing for me, but when we started dating, I told him about my past. "That sounds tough, but don't worry. I'll always be here for you," he reassured me. Not long after, Chase asked me to marry him. He always wanted our relationship to lead to marriage, and quickly introduced me to his parents. When I told them about growing up in the orphanage, they listened carefully and reassured me. "It wouldn't affect your marriage," my father-in-law said. It made me really happy. They even said, "Your background doesn't matter in becoming our daughter-in-law," my mother-in-law added, which made me feel really good. But my sister-in-law, Marley, who was very close to her brother, seemed surprised, asking, "You grew up in an orphanage?" My husband had to scold her. Looking back, she probably didn't like me from the start. I didn't think much of it then, just assuming we were still getting to know each other. Before we got married, my husband and I discussed the idea of moving in with his parents. We seriously considered it, but I decided to keep my job. My husband was about to be transferred for work, and although I thought about quitting to move with him, my career was thriving. I had just been given more responsibilities. After a lot of discussion, we agreed he would move on his own. I planned to visit him over Memorial Day weekend so we could spend the long weekend together. Right after the wedding, the thought of moving in with my in-laws felt overwhelming. However, my husband probably felt more comfortable knowing I was living with them while he was away. Maybe he wanted us to live together so he wouldn't have to worry about his mother. I understood his perspective. Since I lost my parents when I was young, I always wished for a family, so the idea of living with my in-laws didn't seem so bad. Besides, they had always treated me kindly, and I grew to care for them. Eventually, I did move in with them. It wasn't easy juggling work and the responsibilities of being a daughter-in-law, but having a family again made me feel happy and whole. Then one day, my father-in-law came to me with a surprising request. It was the beginning of some trouble in our seemingly happy living arrangement. It happened when my usually anxious mother-in-law, who often acted bossy towards my father-in-law, was out shopping. I was getting ready to do some cleaning on my day off when my father-in-law asked to talk to me. "What's up?" I asked. "Well, I don't want my wife to find out, but I need to take time off from work," he said hesitantly. "Time off?" I asked, surprised. He explained that he'd been having problems with his boss and coworkers, and his health had gotten so bad that he had no choice but to take a break. My mother-in-law is a nice person, but she's always anxious and a bit overworried. Living with them, I noticed how she tended to fret a lot, and my father-in-law walked on eggshells around her to avoid upsetting her. He had always been on the thin side, but lately I realized he seemed to have lost some weight. It would have been nice if my mother-in-law genuinely cared about my father-in-law's weight loss. But when he took a sick day because of a cold before, she scolded him. "A cold? Everyone else at work is climbing the career ladder. You're always taking days off for health reasons. That's why you're not getting promoted." Instead of being concerned, she tended to criticize him. He probably tried his best to keep going, no matter how bad he felt. But his health got worse, and he secretly took time off to go to the hospital. He was struggling both mentally and physically, with him leaving work early, often being late, and calling in sick. There was talk about him needing to take a break from work, but he didn't want to upset my mother-in-law at any cost. "If I mentioned taking a break, she might even leave me," he confessed. Those words cut deep. His family had shown me nothing but kindness, welcoming me with open arms despite my upbringing in an orphanage. Determined to stand by him, I resolved to be his support through this difficult period. "Okay, I'll send you money every month. Use it for expenses," I said. "I'm really sorry. I'll try to get better soon and go back to work." "Thank you so much," my father-in-law replied. After that, he continued to pretend to go to work, while I sent money to his bank account for living expenses. My mother-in-law wasn't very thorough with checking her bank statements, so she didn't notice my transfers. He'd act like he was going to work, but instead went to a mental health clinic or for walks in the peaceful mountains. Over time, my father-in-law started looking better. I thought he might go back to work soon, but then something unexpected happened. After a fight with her husband, my sister-in-law went back to her parents' home. There's nothing like being back home," Marley sighed. "I thought I'd lose my mind if I stayed with that stupid husband of mine. I'll be here for a while. Can you make meals for me, too?" she asked. I knew from the start that my sister-in-law didn't like me. At our first family meeting, my husband was upset because she clearly showed her disapproval during our wedding. She had a sour look the whole time and even told me straight out, "My brother looks great, but you?" He could have married someone prettier. Marley openly judged me for being raised in an institution, saying, "It's embarrassing that you didn't have parents at the wedding." However, she got married before us and had already moved out, so I thought I wouldn't have to deal with her much. That's why I thought it would be okay to live with my in-laws. If she had still been living at home, I wouldn't have even considered moving in, knowing how she would treat me every day. I thought her stay was just temporary because of her marriage problems, and expected her to leave in a few days. Even though mother-in-law was stern with my father-in-law, she had never been harsh towards me. Even if my sister-in-law made mean comments, I believed my mother-in-law would defend me. But I was wrong. One day when I came back from work, my mother-in-law's behavior seemed strange. "Is something bothering you?" I asked. She seemed distant, not talking to me like usual. When I asked her what was wrong, she said, "Have you been pretending to be the ideal daughter-in-law while bad-mouthing me behind my back?" "What? I've never said anything bad about you. You've always been kind to me, and I'm really thankful." "Why would I say bad things about you?" I retorted. "I see how it is," she said coldly, leaving the room. In the hallway, my sister-in-law was smirking. "Looks like you're not in her good books anymore. Did your true colors come out? Being from an orphanage, your background really does matter, huh? It's best not to gossip about people, you know?" "I haven't said anything bad about her," I replied firmly. Oh, the neighbors seem to have heard everything, Marley continued. When I came back home after so long, they told me you've been talking badly about her all the time. What? Who are these neighbors? I exclaimed. Well, it's been a while since I got married and moved out, so I kind of forgot their names, she responded. I never said any of that. Stop making things up, I repeated angrily. Oh, how disrespectful. Mom, she's calling me a liar and being mean to me, my sister-in-law whined as she walked into my mother-in-law's room. After that, my sister-in-law's mean behavior got worse. I was told to sleep in the hallway and take the last turn for a bath because I'm just a guest. She complained to my mother-in-law about every little thing. Every time I had to explain, I hadn't said it or done any of it, but my mother-in-law seemed to believe my sister-in-law and be influenced by her. My sister-in-law stayed longer, making me wonder if she planned to stay forever. With all these worries, I headed to work feeling downhearted. I'm back, I said as I walked through the door, before my mother-in-law would warmly say, welcome back, but now it was quiet. I'll start making dinner, I continued, stepping into the living room. Usually my mother-in-law would rush me to make dinner, but today was different. When I came home, I saw my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law eating sushi together. Surprise! My sister-in-law exclaimed. Then, with a smirk, she added, oh, looks like someone who isn't really family is here. You weren't planning on having sushi, were you? My mother-in-law continued eating without acknowledging me, her eyes fixed on the TV. If you wanted sushi, you should have told me. I came straight home after shopping, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Huh? No one said they wanted that, my sister-in-law replied dismissively, not even bothering to look at me. Hey, Mom, Dad, I went out with my friends today and got some delicious pudding. Let's eat it together, my sister-in-law chirped, completely ignoring my presence. They eagerly started eating the pudding. Exhausted from work and too drained to argue, I quietly went to my room without eating. The next day, my sister-in-law said she was going out with friends and asked me to drive her to the station. I said no because it's a weekday and I have work. Just take the day off. It's fine. Your cute little sis-in-law just wants a ride. She hasn't had a chance to relax since she got married, right? Can't you be a bit nicer to her now? She asked. With all due respect, didn't you go out with friends last night after getting a late call? It seems like you've been going out almost every day since you came home. I have work. Please take the bus or train, I concluded firmly. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were talking quietly, but I was done and left for work. However, that night, the event that made me decide to leave this house happened. I got delayed at work and came home after buying groceries, expecting to face some criticism. It was raining heavily when I left the office, and I got soaked just getting in and out of the car. I wondered what nasty surprise was waiting for me tonight. But when I got home, they were all eating takeout again, just like the day before. No hello, acting like they didn't see me, but I was used to it. I looked out into the courtyard from the hallway and saw something in the middle of the garden. Looking closer, I saw it was my stuff. My designer bag that I bought with my first paycheck, shoes that were a birthday gift for my husband, and even my work computer, all wet. I was shocked. My sister-in-law said with a smirk, having the strangers' things in the house grossed me out, so I threw them out, flaunting a designer bag like that. How arrogant of you. Neither of my in-laws said anything about her terrible behavior. Why didn't you stop her? Have I done something to you? Do you really believe her lies about me bad-mouthing you and bullying her? Aren't you upset with her for what she did? I asked. My mother-in-law avoided my eyes and stayed silent. Why won't you say anything? I asked again. I can't talk to strangers. I can't be friendly with someone who's not family, my mother-in-law replied, not even looking at me. My sister-in-law grinned, waiting for me to respond. Wait, where's my father-in-law? I've been the one supporting him during his time off. I've been the one handling finances in this house. I did it out of gratitude. But shouldn't he stand up for me now? Surely he'd be on my side. Hoping for his support, I looked at him, but he walked past me without a word and went into his room. That was it for me. I see, I've had enough, I snapped. Oh, are you upset? I'm sorry. Honestly, I never liked you from the start. You know, being from an institution and all. Just don't regret leaving. My sister-in-law replied with a sneer. As if I would, I replied. Good riddance, she added. I packed my things and got ready to leave right away. Only my father-in-law seemed worried, because he relied on me financially, but even he didn't try to stop me or speak up for me. I was done with his indifference. Although my husband's work assignment was far away, I just wanted to get out of that house as soon as possible. I quickly got into my car and drove to him. I never talked to my husband about any of this. I doubt my mother-in-law told him about my sister-in-law coming back home. If he knew, he would have reached out to me because he knows I don't get along with her. But my husband never mentioned anything about my sister-in-law in his calls or messages. I never doubted my husband's behavior before, but maybe she's manipulating him, feeding him lies about things. Even now, as I go to him, he might treat me the same way they did. My heart was heavy, feeling suspicious even toward my husband, whom I trust the most. If he's siding with them, maybe divorce is the only option. That's how distressed I felt. When I arrived at his out-of-state apartment, he hadn't returned yet, probably busy since it was the end of the month. As I waited, my husband came in energetically, maybe noticing the lights. "What? You're here? You should have told me you were coming. I would have come back sooner." "What a pleasant surprise," he said with a big smile. Seeing him happy to see me after all that happened at my in-laws' house, mixed with relief and humiliation, and I could have pulled back my tears. "What's wrong? Did I do something? Seriously, what's going on?" Chase asked, concerned. It seemed my husband had no clue about the treatment I endured at his parents' house. I gathered myself, knowing I needed to explain everything clearly to him. I started recounting everything. "Your father took medical leave without telling your mother, and I've been financially helping him. Your sister returned and is now staying at their house. She lied about me to your mother, turning her against me. They treated me like an outsider, ignored me, and even ruined my belongings by leaving them out in the rain." Through tears and pauses, I poured out everything to him. Finally, I made it clear. "I can't go back to that house ever again. If you can't support me on this, I will want a divorce." My husband apologized for being too focused on work and not checking in on me more often. He regretted his family's behavior toward me. "You don't have to go back there or even talk to them again," he said firmly. "Even if you forgive them someday, I won't. I'm cutting ties with my parents and sister, and I promise not to provide any more financial aid to my father." That night, I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. The tension I'd been carrying melted away, and I slept peacefully by his side. After leaving my in-laws' house, I never went back. Commuting from my husband's out-of-state place wasn't practical, but I had already talked to my company about working remotely. My job didn't require me to be in the office all the time, and many of my colleagues worked from home too. Although I still had to visit the office a few times a month, some colleagues lived even farther away, so working remotely wasn't a problem. Living with my in-laws and dealing with my sister-in-law's bullying, I hadn't truly experienced married life. But now we could finally live like newlyweds. As I set up my remote workstation, as expected, my mother-in-law contacted me. It turned out that the day after I left their house was my father-in-law's payday. My mother-in-law usually takes out a certain amount and transfers it to their household account, but this time she couldn't. It was only then that she realized I had been helping them financially during my father-in-law's time off. "Hey, why didn't you tell me you were covering the living expenses?" she demanded. "He asked me not to," I replied. "He said he didn't want you to know, so I kept it to myself. Anyway, we're running out of money for living expenses, and there's no one to cook or do laundry. The place is a mess. As daughter-in-law, you need to come back and take care of these things and send money quickly," she said coldly. "How heartless! I already told you, didn't I? I'm not going back to that house where they treat me like a servant. Why should I help people who hate me, ruin my things, and treat me like this?" I shot back. "Aren't you my son's wife? Without your help, we can't pay the bills or even shop," she retorted. "That's exactly why I'm saying it. I'm an outsider, so it's none of my business, right?" I replied, and hung up, ignoring my mother-in-law's complaints. She and my sister-in-law kept bothering me with calls and messages, but I ignored all of them. Even after my husband returned from work, they kept calling persistently. When my husband finally answered, he told them firmly, "I'll forgive you for how you treated her, but I'm not sending her back to you. I'm not coming back either. I don't see you as my family anymore. Leave my wife alone or you'll regret it," he threatened. Considering my sister-in-law adored her brother and my mother-in-law heavily relied on him, they were probably shocked. A few days later, I got a call from my father-in-law. "Living with them is getting too hard," he said, pleading. "Please continue the financial help. I'm grateful you accepted me when I married, despite my growing up in an orphanage," I responded. "But you didn't support me when I needed it. Even with all the financial help I gave, I don't owe you anything. Why should I help those who joined others in ignoring me? I'll never assist you again." And with that, I ended the call. Later on, my persistent mother-in-law and sister-in-law shamelessly showed up at my workplace. Since I was already working remotely and had a bad feeling about them, I had informed my company about the situation. Security was alerted right away. They caused a scene, demanding that the company make me send money back home. When my husband heard about it, he said, "Report them to the police." My colleagues were supportive, saying, "I can't believe you had to live with those people. Focus on your remote work with your husband." As for my in-laws, my father-in-law's health declined under the pressure from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and he eventually quit his job. My sister-in-law tried to return to her husband's family, but he refused to take her back. The town quickly learned about her drama at my workplace, causing an uproar at her in-laws' place. The real reason for their fight was her affair, and this incident added to their problems, leading to an immediate decision to divorce. Left without a home, my in-laws and sister-in-law moved to a cheap apartment, managing with part-time jobs. As for my husband and me, we're finally enjoying peaceful days, feeling mentally and physically fulfilled. Recently, we found out we're expecting a child, and we couldn't be happier. We're eagerly awaiting the day we meet our baby, cherishing our time together.